life isn't just about being safe and comfortable. You want to take some risk in life. I got into this mindset of I'm going to try things. I'll end up finding out if I can't do something. And I'm just going to keep doing things until I hit a brick wall.
You've got to continuously break the mold in a pathway to peak performance.
You grind it out. It's like going to the gym or in anything that you do. A little 1% gain every year compounds. And after a while, it's a big gain. I don't like to fake it till you make it, but I think maybe do it until it becomes second nature, which isn't as sexy a thing to say, but that's a truth for me. You may be one of the most rarest things that exists in all of creation. Don't take that for granted. Take that seriously. This existence is valuable, every second of it.
Rod Hall, welcome to the Pathway to Peak Performance. So great to have you in, my friend.
Great to be here.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
So we talked, and your charity is?
It's Direct Relief. Right. They provide medical assistance to people in poverty that can't afford it. And they have a very high efficiency rating as well. They don't use professional fundraising, so they're very high. A lot of your money goes to actually help people.
Yeah, unlike some, we won't name the other organizations because we don't want to.
Yeah, right.
Don't want to give them actual credit.
Right.
But there are some where it's like some ridiculous amount, like 90% goes to the administration.
Or even many.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Well, so the story of the show is it's about you and your pathway to peak performance. And you have a super interesting story. I remember for the first time I met you, and as I got to know you and hearing that story, I just thought it was fascinating. And I'm so glad to have you here because I think it's a real story of grit and hard work, and a desire to actually make something happen. So take us back, childhood, and then let's roll all the way through.
Well, I haven't been as convinced as you about this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. We'll see. So I grew up on a farm in Kansas. Now, my dad was an airline pilot, so we had more money than the average farmer, but he was a very hard worker because he flew for TWA. He was a military pilot, then a TWA pilot, but we had 100 head of beef cattle as well, a fully functioning cattle farm. So you can imagine there's just an insane amount of work that goes along with that. And so that's the environment I grew up in. And there's kind of crazy stuff about my upbringing too. Like, my dad, he was very into toughness, so he had us out in the middle of the freezing cold of winter cutting wood. We heated the house with wood, all sorts of stuff like that. So, all of that goes into the upbringing, I think. Super hard working father. I guess from that, I got a very strong work ethic. Grew up in the middle of Kansas, which is a whole different thing to California, as you know, and I think that instilled in me a lot of interesting values. And then having lived overseas and lived here, and you get a lot of perspective from having all these different groups of people that that you interact with through your life. So, yeah, that was the beginning.
There's a certain thing about people from the Midwest.
Yeah,
it's interesting, and there's a work ethic there, and a sort of.
And I think a general, I don't know how to put it otherwise, but they're just nice people.
Yeah.
Generally, I think that's true of the people in the Midwest. Whereas there's good people everywhere I've lived. It just seems some places are less than others.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. All the more reason to be careful about where you spend your time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So you're there growing up in Kansas. You're working, getting up early, doing the cattle thing.
Before the break of day, most days, feeding cattle, feeding my 4-H steer. I raised a 4-H steer from the time I was 7 years old every year and sold it at the county fair, which paid for my college for the most part. So my parents would make me put most of the proceeds from the steer into a bank account, and then that bank account grew over time and ended up paying for college.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is that's a detail that I didn't know.
Yeah, that's a new one. And then I had 20 head of cattle too. When I went to college, I had built up a little herd of cattle on my own. And so I ended up selling those cattle, and that further paid for the college. Now, my college was pretty inexpensive because I went to Kansas State University, studied electrical engineering. But Yeah.
And hey, what a great school to go to. And
Wildcats, go Wildcats.
yeah, right. So long story short, you study electrical engineering,
Yeah.
and then from there, you have this really interesting career.
Yeah.
It is a truly,
Yeah.
you know what, a lot of people,
I never would have predicted it.
yeah. Let's go.
It's a very not what, but this is, I think, I always tell my kids this. Nobody is as linear as they'll tell you at this stage in life. It all sounds like it makes sense and stitches together, but of course, at the beginning, it doesn't make any sense, and we just kind of find our way, But I started working for AT&T as a field engineer. I ended up working on the Pizza Hut network. Um, and Pizza Hut was one of the first companies that integrated data and voice. So they had a 1-800 number that delivered your order into a local Pizza Hut, and up on a screen would pop your record. It was one of the very first, if not the first instance of a call center, the way we know it now. So they had funny problems, like people would call up and they'd say, "Oh, hi, Jock, I see your last order was a pepperoni pizza." And Jock would say, "How do you know that?" Because people didn't understand.
That's never happened before.
Anyway, so I worked on that. And then as a result of that, I got pulled into, about a year and a half later, I was in Wichita, Kansas. I started working for them in Wichita, Kansas, which is where Pizza Hut is based, or was based. I get pulled into New Jersey to AT&T headquarters at the time, the old AT&T. And I started working as a technical liaison to product teams. So that's how I got going in my AT&T career. And then I got into a management development program there and did a bunch of different operational jobs. Ended up, last job I had at AT&T was in Europe. I ended up moving over to France and running about 20 countries worth of product marketing in Europe because I chased my wife over there.
Then tell us about that story. That's a good one.
Well, I met my wife at AT&T, Judith, who you know, and she was very into international stuff. Wanted to do international things. Was just very fascinated by that, passionate about it, and applies. We'd started dating, but we weren't engaged yet. She applies for a job in Paris, which was just a long shot. These jobs were highly sought after because at the time they were full-blown expat deals. You got all kinds of financial benefits from doing this, in addition to a really cool job. So she applies for this, and out of the blue, the person that was going to take the job backed out at the last minute. And my wife, Judith, speaks French fluently and was highly qualified. So guess what? She gets the job. We're dating. She tells me, "Hey, I think I want to take this job." I said, "Well, you should take it. I mean, I can't stop you. You ought to take the job." We get engaged about 6 months later. I asked her to marry me. I go back into my mentors at AT&T, who are pretty senior people because I'm on this management development track. And I said, "Hey, they knew Judith." I said, "She's got this job in Paris. I need to find a job over there. I'm going to go over there." And I remember my mentor said, "You're going to destroy your AT&T career if you go over there." And I said to him, "If you don't get me a job, I'll busk in the Paris metro with my guitar." He said, "Okay, I guess I'll go find you a job."
That may be the best.
And he still reminds me of that to this day. Every time if I see him, a guy named Lance Zingale, he'll remind me of that. So I ended up going over to Paris. Was told that this was going to, as I just said, potentially destroy my career. I get over there. It's the best job I've ever had because I had full autonomy. There was no safety net. Everything you did was on you, kind of like a startup or, it was a real job, not just making slides at AT&T headquarters. So I'm like, I don't want to, this is silly. I'm going to see about looking at some other options. So I applied to a business school in France called INSEAD, and got an MBA there. And that's how then the career went off in the direction of financial services and becoming a stock analyst, which is what I did most of my career, as you know. So yeah, it's a winding path.
Yeah. I imagine at that point in time, you're thinking, hey, electrical engineer, you get this job.
Yeah.
We're same age. So I remember back in those days, you're kind of trying to figure out what you're going to do. and, it finds you, the path finds you, and you are on that path. You start making decisions. And then there you are in Europe. How cool is that?
Yeah, incredible.
That must have been
Incredible.
like in a really unique time too,
Yeah.
to be there. You're there, you're in the 90s.
Yeah, moved there in 96.
Yeah.
I was there for 14 years, France for 3, London for another 11. But yeah, that is a completely life-altering experience because what you don't realize, we all go through life with kind of tinted glasses on, and from a cultural point of view, that's very true. It's very hard to see outside your own culture until you kind of go native somewhere else a little bit, and then you can begin to see, oh, there's American culture has these attributes I didn't really recognize because I was embedded in it, and French culture has some of these attributes, and British culture has these. And culture is very hard to explain too. It's usually stuff you can't put into words. It's feelings and how people perceive the world. So it really is eye-opening that way.
And dimensionalized by time also,
Yeah,
cultural,
it changes over time.
Yeah.
Well, for example, American culture, I don't, not to get into politics too much, but when we left in 96, the US was much less divided than it was when we came back. And it's kind of like a baby growing. You don't necessarily notice the baby growing as much if you're there every day, but if you go away and then you come back 14 years later, it's like, whoa, this is really significantly changed. And that was a shocker for both me and my wife as we returned.
Yeah, I would
So,
imagine. I remember doing that here. I mean, culturally within the United States, I had always wanted to do international business, but
yeah,
vis-a-vis the work in healthcare, you're in the U.S. healthcare system, and so that's what you're doing. And the reality was, I left here, and I went to Houston. And when I came back from Houston, I was to visit. I was like, and it wasn't that long. I was like, whoa, San Francisco's so different.
yeah.
So, it was kind of crazy.
Well, that's true too. I left the East Coast culture and I came back to San Francisco culture or Bay Area, which is in itself a huge change. But all those experiences broaden your perspective on different ways of looking at things.
It's true. When I came back from New York and I came back here, I literally for a minute thought, I don't think I can do it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
too slow. I can't pay it. Right?
That's right.
I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And it took me a good 6 months to acclimate to what I felt like was like island time. Like everybody was kind of moving.
It is like that here. Yeah. Yeah. It took me a couple of years because not only going from London, same thing, a big city to where we live now, Marin County, there's a big change in pace. There's also a big change in diversity. There's all kinds of changes that, go on between those two places and differences that I think are interesting. So take some time to adapt to.
So when you said when you decided to get your MBA, you're in France. How long were you engaged before you got married?
Oh, we were engaged for about 8 months, 9 months.
Yep.
Something like that. We get married and then I move over there.
Okay.
So we get engaged.
Oh, you get engaged.
Yeah. And then we got married in the US in Ohio, where Judith's from. And then then I moved over to Europe and joined her in Paris. And then I worked in Paris with AT&T for about 1.5 years. And then I went off to business school.
So what was that like?
Working
Working
to move
in Paris. I mean, like,
oh man, it was, well, I'll tell you a funny little anecdote, but there are all sorts of things like this. I'm this basically guy from Kansas. Okay. Midwestern guy. I show up in Paris. I don't know if you're aware, the French don't have the same queuing system we do. So when I first got in there, I go down to this local store, the grocery store, to pick some stuff up. I'm sitting there and these old ladies keep cutting in front of me and I'm just letting them. And this goes on for 15, 20 minutes. I'm just standing there with my stuff, but I can't get up to the register because people keep cutting in front of me. And so finally I'm just like, well, I'm just going to have to push my way ahead here and, violate all of my principles as a guy that grew up in Kansas. So, funny little things like that. But then it was just both very eye-opening, but also very difficult to acclimate to a new culture like that.
especially as an American, it feels
Yeah, but I think either way, like if you were French coming here, you'd have a struggle too. There's a lot of things you don't appreciate about the U.S. culture that you would start to appreciate as you get here.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Right.
I can only tell you my experience of being in Paris, and, trying to get to see a Paris Saint-Germain game,
Oh yeah.
or just go to the
Yeah.
Eiffel Tower and not speaking French. That's the one thing. It's like, you're gonna live in Paris, you better speak some French.
Little French, and the customer service culture is, a universe away from the U.S. U.S. has best in class customer service. I think probably generally across the world, there's not much better. There might be equivalents, but Europe is definitely not there. So those differences. I mean, we could go on and on for the whole podcast about the differences between the U.S. and French culture.
Yeah.
Although they have a lot of similarities too, which was, one of the reasons the French helped us in the Revolutionary War is we both think we're the best, which is unique to both France and the U.S. There's not too many others that are that convinced that they're the best in the world.
And all you have to do is take a Frenchman to Texas to let him know. All right. So
Yeah.
you're in France, and then it's like a whole other life in
Yeah.
London. I mean, you have
Yeah.
long-term friends there, and
Yeah, we go. So I'm in France for 3 years. 1 year of that, I'm going to business school. Then I get out of business school. During that time, I thought I would go into the internet bubble was on at the time. So I thought, well, I'm in telecoms. I'm going to go into a startup. That's what I want to do. During the time that I was at INSEAD, which is where I got my MBA, I realized, oh, there's this other thing called being an equity analyst that looks really interesting. And they're hiring guys like me that used to be in the telecom industry to come in and cover these new entrant telcos. And so I started interviewing for that and ended up getting a job doing that in London. So that's how I kind of made the transition to becoming a stock analyst. And that was a very exciting time. I mean,
it's blowing up. I mean,
it was like AI now. I mean, it was a completely explosive time. The internet was growing. Telecom was in the middle of it. It was just incredible to be in that seat at that time.
I can remember back in those days, like being in San Francisco Internet Society and being at like meetings where, like they've got the full panel up there, and like guys are talking about, hey, we're going to be able to play video over the web. And you're like, going, yeah, really?
Yeah.
And, that's when DSL on
Right.
broadband just really take off, and like the world just really changed.
My first big equity report was on broadband, DSL and broadband technology. And I remember a friend of mine and I at AT&T, even before I became an analyst, we were talking about starting a company to provide work at home services to people. This is back in the mid 90s. We were thinking about this. And then I started working remotely really early because I was into all this stuff. And look what it took. I mean, it took a pandemic for us to really adopt that technology 20 years later.
Yeah.
That's what's incredible. That's another incredible thing about technology. It can all be there, but it may take some catalyst for people to really broadly adopt it,
Yeah, it's funny. Like Larry Ellison was totally on the whole, WAN kind of approach to workstation, remote workstation.
Yeah.
Thing. And that was a really interesting concept back in something that people couldn't really fathom until we started to see like Placeware and WebEx emerge as being a solution. I remember not having to get on an airplane because I could do some of my work via WebEx, which was pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah. So, you're in the heart of this thing.
Yeah.
Living in London.
Yeah.
And what's propelling you at this point in your life? I mean, you always are this guy that's always you're making stuff happen.
Yeah.
It's funny. I remember, like I would be watching CNBC and I'd be like, that's Rod.
That's that guy. How did he get on there? What happened?
So, you've always been making stuff happen. So what's going through your brain at that point in time? Like, are you consciously thinking like, I'm planning my career, I'm going to do certain things, or how are you putting it all together?
Yeah. Okay. It's a good question. I've always been pretty ambitious. That's one of the things that underpins all of this. I'm a pretty ambitious person. And I also realized, so when moving to France felt like a huge risk to me, massive risk. And it really paid off for me. So I recognize, life isn't just about being safe and comfortable. You want to you want to take some risk in life. If you're presenting with opportunity, you want to take some risk. And I guess that was what was driving me at the time. I was just thinking, boy, I'm passionate about this technology. It's super interesting to be in the middle of this. I'm going to make the most of it. I'm just going to do my best. I'm going to take some risks from a analysis point of view. I'm going to put myself out there, try new things, see if I can get them done. Like, for instance, you mentioned CNBC. I mean, that's an example of a situation. If you had asked me when I started my career, if I would ever want to go on TV, I would have said, absolutely not. There's no way. I'm not qualified to do that. That's insane, Jock. That'll never happen. Well, it happened because I got into this mindset of I'm going to try things. I'll end up finding out if I can't do something. And I'm just going to keep doing things until I hit a brick wall. And it turns out I didn't hit that many brick walls, and I was just able to do a lot of things I never thought I'd be able to do.
I think that's a key thing.
Yeah.
There's always a lot of density in the things that you say, Rod. Over the years, that's one of the things I've noticed about you. Like, there's a lot. Sometimes I think about sort of some of the things that you've said to me, and I go, like some of those walks that we take.
Oh, yeah.
And you're an ambitious guy. You're also coming into a point in time where risk is sort of the reward. There's this reward of the risk. This is this environment for risk, and it's sort of like exciting, and there's electricity in the air around it, and you're kind of built for that. So we talk about nature and dimension of time and all this kind of stuff. You're really in them. You're stepping into this place where you belong.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I guess so. I mean, it's interesting. I don't necessarily always think of it that way, but I do believe in serendipity and being blessed. I think it was just an incredible luck that I ended up in that place at that time, being the person that I am.
Yeah, and you maximized it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, yeah.
So let's talk about what's your career like at this point in time. So you start off and it accelerates.
Yeah, I started off a junior analyst in this telecom bubble covering new entrant telcos in Europe, but still very similar to the stuff that was going on here in the US. People were laying big chunks of fiber and things like that. I survived the implosion of the bubble. So my telecom research team was 20 people, which is a huge number of people. That collapsed to 10 during that, bubble implosion, and I was still employed. But I started getting kind of bored with the business of telecom, and it became clear that things are moving toward the internet, but I'd always been passionate about the technology, the base technology. So I got an opportunity to move over to JP Morgan from the company I started at to cover technology stocks. So covering Nokia there, Ericsson, which was telecom technology, stuff like that. And so I took that opportunity to do that. Got myself more into technology and did pretty well with that at JP Morgan, but really enjoyed it because those technology companies, they were more difficult to cover as a stock analyst because the business models are also different. Whereas telecom business models are very similar. You're doing the same thing, providing the same service. Once you know one, you kind of know them all. Where in the technology world, that's not true at all.
Yeah, it's different.
That's right.
Yeah.
Got to go through the advent of the iPhone and the impact that had on Nokia, which was absolutely fascinating. I was covering Blackberry at the time. I went through the growth of wireless technology, cellular, because at the time the Europeans had, because of standards adoption, they were way ahead of the US on cellular technology. And so we were seeing a lot of stuff there first that then came to the US later. So that was probably the first, beyond the internet bubble, I got to go through that. Then I went through the smartphone revolution. And
so you're seeing TDMA and GSM,
right,
and all of that stuff.
That's right.
I remember it's funny. I had it back when TDMA was the dominant. And I had a compact iPack with a GSM phone that I would use.
Oh, yeah.
Connect up to get my email, back in the day. So I have my TDMA phone so I could actually talk to people, and I have my GSM phone so I could actually get the data.
Yeah.
And then eventually it all kind of merged together. And when the blue Blackberry came out, then you're like, hey,
that's right. Right. Yeah, I was desperate to get a Blackberry. I was testing when, so I'm into all this mobile data. I was covering Ericsson, who provide all the infrastructure for that. And I had an old, at the time, it was a Huawei device that ran Microsoft. It was a smartphone, one of the first smartphones. And I was measuring how much data I was using. And I was using on the order of 100 kilobytes a month or something like that. I go to the US when the iPhone launched. I'm like, I've got to go over there. So my bosses are like, go ahead. And I say, I'm going to buy one of these iPhones. They said, yeah, buy it and bring it. So I buy this iPhone. I'm one of the first guys in London to have one. I bring it back, hack it so I can use it on the cellular networks. The very first month I had that thing, I used over a megabyte of data. I'm like, oh my God. And my bill was like $1,000, or like in pounds.
Yeah.
Just an unbelievable blowout data bill that I had to pay. So I had to go into my boss at the time and say, hey, we're gonna have to pay $1,000. I spent it. And he's like, how did you spend all this money? I said, these things drive incredible data usage. It's unbelievable how much you use on an iPhone versus these old devices. So
Yeah.
just incredible stuff.
So which clogs the network, right? So you've got to start to increase the bandwidth capability of the networks to just handle the action.
Incredible increases, right? And then you could see that thing was going to absolutely destroy Nokia and destroy Blackberry and all that. And we can go into all that. That's all super interesting.
Since you were covering Blackberry, and Chen from Sybase goes to run them eventually, it's like, that's a Hail Mary at that point.
Yeah, at that point, it was just
over,
done.
right?
Yeah, it was like what can we do to save the company?
Their CPR.
That's right. It was all over by then.
It really was. It was kind of almost silly to even think. I don't even know what that was about. I mean,
just a turnaround type thing. And there was some value in the software at the time, but then even that got
push capability, right?
Yeah, they had some some of the patents relating to messaging were quite valuable and are still used in some of the technologies we have today. At the time, they also were embedded in a lot of telco networks. So there were servers sitting there that were passing those messages, and that was for a short period of time a valuable thing. And then that got blown away by over-the-top data and just the availability of data, and
amazing time.
Right. It was. I had 2 conference calls at that time, earnings calls I was on with both Blackberry and Nokia, where I asked a question about Apple. Just, hey, this. I'm looking at these numbers and this looks to me like it really is taking off here. And I remember in both cases, management going on a 15-minute diatribe, taking up half the earnings call, responding to that question, which is the point,
you're in trouble.
Oh boy, this is, yep, I guess this is not going well for them.
Yeah.
And that was a cultural thing too, because both cultures were hardware-oriented cultures, not software. Blackberry a little less so. They were a little bit more software-oriented. But Apple was purely software-oriented, and the paradigm moved to software. And these guys just couldn't adapt culturally. That was their problem. Nokia knew that they needed to move to more of a software oriented culture, but they couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think in that moment, the takeaway is like, hey, it's kind of like Kodak and digital cameras came. It's like, man, I mean, Kodak, if you really think about it, could have owned the digital photography.
That's right.
They could have just,
right.
If they had right. But it's like that again, when you go back to culture, it's that sort of like, hey, that embedded, like even the guys at AT&T that said to you, you're going to kill your career if you just don't stay inside the mold. But you've got to continuously break the mold in a pathway to peak performance. You've got to always push beyond. It's something I think you do as a cyclist, which is really interesting. I think you're always pushing the limits there.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that's exciting. I mean, that's an exciting time.
I realize, the interesting's been very exciting.
Yeah. And then let's talk about where you go from there, because you're in high demand at this point. So what's happening?
Well, so I had done really well covering these companies in Europe, and an opportunity opened up in the US to come back for JP Morgan doing the same thing. So moving within JP Morgan. And so I moved back to the US to cover similar technology companies, and ended up covering Apple and all the consumer services stuff too. So that ended up, I covered networking and infrastructure type companies, and then added Apple and all that stuff to that mix. I ended up with a bunch of stocks by the time it was all over. And so I, came back to the US virtually unknown. I mean, I was known in Europe, not known here, and did well here. Ended up #1 ranked analyst in my sector here. but it's just a grind again, just grinding it out day after day after day. And eventually those returns accumulate. And I guess that's another thing about my life is recognizing the compounding effect of small returns over time.
Man,
That
right?
and that definitely works in hindsight. That's the way to do it. You grind it out. It's like going to the gym or in anything that you do. A little 1% gain every year compounds. And after a while, it's a big gain.
That's dense.
And not everybody does that. A lot of people, I think, one thing I've noticed, and maybe it comes from, uh, you know, I don't know what it comes from. Maybe it's my upbringing, something like that. A lot of people don't keep grinding. They just stop. They think, well, I've gotten there. Now I should wait and let all the benefits come to me. And that never works. Never works. Because there's always somebody that'll keep going.
Yeah.
And that I turned out to be that guy.
And it paid off for you.
Yeah.
In a big way.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you're at JP Morgan and we get to this point in time where there's the huge, what we call the Great Recession.
Now that I was in Europe for that, I was in London. I moved to the US in 2010. So '08 happened while I was sitting in London.
Okay. So you're in London, but I mean, this whole world changes. Yeah. And you survived that too.
Yeah.
So what I want to get to is, you finished your career at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
JP Morgan has a culture. Goldman Sachs has a culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Both very strong cultures, but very different.
Yeah. And let's talk about that.
Okay.
Let's talk about that transition.
Yeah.
How you navigate that.
Okay. I'll try to describe the cultural differences between the two companies. JP Morgan is a phenomenal company. Jamie Dimon's probably the most impressive person I've ever met. I've had the chance to meet him a few times, and just unbelievably impressive guy, and a good guy too, I think, ultimately. Goldman Sachs is this long-standing, and JP Morgan is kind of bureaucratic. It's a big company. Chase, there's a lot of employees there. It's a huge company, quite a bit of bureaucracy just because of the size of the thing. Goldman is much more freewheeling and entrepreneurial is how I would describe Goldman. Also a very solid, very, very good company. I think really gets unfairly treated in the popular media. When you look at Goldman and the people there, they're absolutely top quality, very ethical people. However, it's a place where people are given a lot of independence to go and do things. That's just the way the culture works. You're expected to come in there and be a very high performer, and you are expected, as a result of that, to go and take control of things and get stuff done. So,
well, yeah, I think at a much smaller scale, I run my companies that way. I expect, I'm not a micro guy. I can micro if I have to.
Right.
Like when I get in the weeds, I'll do it. But I like to say, here's the objective. You're qualified. We hired you to do this job. Go get it done.
That's right. And that's why Goldman's so successful, by the way, is this independence and this. I will give you an anecdote on this. I get to Goldman in 2017. 2018, the administration has a conference on quantum computing. They want to make sure that the U.S. is doing what we can in quantum computing. So they have an event at the White House. They invite all these quantum computing scientists from everywhere, but also representatives from industry to come in. And Goldman says, hey, Rod, why don't you go and represent all of Goldman Sachs at this thing in 2018? Because you seem to know a little something about quantum computing. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm the right guy for this. Are you sure about this? Because I go in there and the CIO of JP Morgan was representing JP Morgan. That's the kind of place Goldman is. I think that highlights the type of difference in culture that you've got between those two places. Here I am, this guy, but they judged me to be, at the time, the best person to go and represent the company, and they expect me to be able to do that.
And you did.
And I did. Yeah. And I learned a lot of interesting things about quantum computing.
And how cool is that?
Oh, it was incredible. One of the things, this gets into, you and I talked a little bit about existence and consciousness and all this kind of stuff before we started here. But one of the funniest discussions I had there, or interactions I had, is I asked one of these scientists, these physicists, are working on this stuff. I said, well, how does this work? How these things can solve problems in an instant that would take another computer a million years to solve. Yeah, how does this work? And he said, we don't really know, but we think we're leveraging computing in many different parallel universes all at once. That's our best theory. It's just, okay.
Wow.
Okay, that's interesting.
Little string theory and
Yeah, not reading that off the internet. That's an actual scientist telling you that,
yeah, it's not an LLM hallucination.
No, this is the theory,
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah, and as blockchain and crypto and all this starts to happen, you're right in the thick of it.
I did work on that. I was kind of the guy that there was not necessarily the only one. There were a lot of really good technology people at Goldman, but blockchain popped up and I was asked to write a report about that, the technology, just describing it, what does it mean, all that sort of thing. So I kind of ended up doing different projects kind of all through my career because I'm passionate about technology and really interested in it. So I always have a little bit of a finger in new technologies, and then I'd end up writing a report on them. And the report would be a way that I'd learn a lot more about the technology too.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting in those seats, you have access to incredible people. Anybody will pick the phone up to the guy at Goldman Sachs is a senior analyst who's calling them about blockchain technology or crypto.
Yeah. One thing I think goes back to your roots that's interesting about you is that you're going to call it like it is. In other words, another right. You're equally unfair to everyone, right?
Yeah. Right. That's right.
So, the reality is that you've had this incredible career. And as you look back on it, it seems from the outside to people oftentimes like, it's just this charmed life. Like everything is so perfect. Everything is so easy. All of these things.
Right.
In the meantime, not only do you have the dimension of the career, you have a marriage and you have children.
Yeah.
You have relationships. You have all sorts of things going on. And you don't have to be specific, but in general, where do you go when things are hard? How do you handle the tough stuff? Because I don't know anybody that doesn't have it at some point in time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's a crucial question, because if you can't handle the tough stuff, which this isn't charmed, it's not all it's like working out. We were talking about that earlier. People might see the result of a lot of hard work. In the end, somebody's done a lot of strength training and they see that they're really strong now, but that took a lot of hard work and a lot of tough days in order to get there. That wasn't an easy process. And that's true in a career like this too. There are probably many, many more hard days than there are easy ones. And in fact, it's kind of like every day is a hard day in that job. There's a few things I would say I guess a few answers I'd give to that question, Jock. One is I'm very blessed to have a very strong partner who's very supportive of me and very capable at the same time. So that's something I just lucky. I lucked into that. I don't know any other way to say it. I'm blessed in that way. That's important. I go to church every week. That was always a reset for me mentally. Like I would go in, sit there and think about things greater than myself. And that's a way to get yourself out of this thinking about your own localized difficulties. And hey, I'm not that special. There's other people going through things tougher than I'm going through. And so that's another one. Working out, physical exercise, that's always something. I've always seen my performance at work as an extension of my physical body's capabilities and ability to perform. So I've always, ran, cycled, worked out to keep myself physically fit so that I can deal with the difficulty that comes along and the challenges that come with a stressful work life. And then eventually, and this wasn't probably true initially, but eventually in my career, you start to learn that, hey, this life we live is a valuable thing. it's rare. Every moment is important. And these little things that seem like a big deal to me right now, they're not really that important in the grand scheme of things. There's more important things. My family, my friends, those things are important. And all this stuff happening at work, whether it be politics or, hey, somebody, I make a mistake in a report, I make a bad stock call, stuff like that. Those are all relatively small things in the grand scheme of life. So yeah, there's a lot of different things go into dealing with difficulty, but it's crucial.
So at the risk of paraphrasing, well, I hate to paraphrase, and I don't like to tell people what to think, but
Yeah.
I do want to kind of pull something out of that is a takeaway, which it seems to me that you keep things in part of the pathway to your peak performance is keeping things in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
You found
That's absolutely right.
you found these areas that work for you. We're all N of one. That
That's right.
things work for some people that don't work for other things.
Right.
Same thing with medications, right? Some medications work for some people, they don't work for other people. You found these areas that work for you, and then you have really the intensity of you as a person, knowing you lean into that stuff. You really embrace it. You're not that intensity, that desire, that ambition is an intensity that is persistent. That's one of the things I noticed about peak performers and then doing the show. There's a persistence. Like, there's never give up. You just keep going.
Yeah, I'm very persistent. That is right. But that doesn't mean that I don't have days where I want to give up, or days when I'm frustrated, or not every day is a, hey man, I'm gonna go kill this day. But what I do tend to do is, if I have a bad day, or a day when I'm down, or I don't think, I might wake up the next day and go, hey, you know what? This is a new day. I'm going to reset this one. None of that matters. Get rid of it. Let's start this one new and do what we can to make this a good one. So it's just that constant resetting, trying to constantly have a better day than you had the day before.
And that relates back to that sort of incremental 1%, Kaizen, if you will. If we were to think about it in the oil business, you just pump out a barrel of oil every day, right? It's sort of like, it's not this massive thing. It's just like continuously, I want to be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday. And I'm thinking about tomorrow, maybe a little bit, sometimes too much, but
yeah.
It's a balancing act. It's not easy to do. And
I think one of the things that I think helps me do that, and this isn't an easy thing, and it's one of the things I worry about with young people today because of all the challenges they see. I try to maintain a hopeful outlook on the future, a positive outlook. So things are always, there is hope in the future. And I think that's another thing that my spiritual life provides me with, but you don't necessarily have to do it through church. There's a lot of ways to think about the future in a hopeful way and recognize that, hey, humanity's always had its challenges, but there are more good people than bad. And we eventually work through those challenges. We get to a better place in the future. And so that's something that's also allowed me, I think, to keep trying, because there's a hope that the future will be better than the present.
Certainly the faith side of things, some of the prayers that we say,
Yeah.
they certainly help.
Yeah. And just, a hopeful outlook on the future.
Yeah. I mean,
things can get better.
That may be, I don't think I've really heard anybody say that on the show so far. And we're still in the infancy of this show. Well, it's such an honor to have you here, and I appreciate you coming on. And the reality is that you've really hit some key things. I oftentimes think when the times get really tough, sometimes I imagine myself hanging off the Golden Gate Bridge with one hand, one arm, and I've got a kid in the other. And just hold on.
Yeah, no,
Like, there's no way I'm gonna let go.
Right.
I've got one of my kids, and
there's two ways this can go, and the one of them I'm not interested in.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. There's not people always think like it's just like so and it's not.
Yeah, right. There's always that. There's a decision you make all the time. It's a constant decision to be hopeful and to make that choice to hold on as opposed to not. There's always that decision to make. All of us have it. We just don't always recognize we're making that decision.
True. True. That's true. And then I think there's also that thing that you said, that reset and a radical self-forgiveness is also a
Absolutely.
key part.
Oh, that's that's an important thing. I mean, forgiveness of your own mistakes is a huge part of the ability to reset.
And of others.
That's right. You can't forgive others until you forgive yourself.
Correct.
I don't believe. I think you have to start with yourself. I find that people that can't forgive themselves, they struggle to forgive others, but that definitely is an important part of this.
You see people holding on to things because they want to. And ultimately, that doesn't serve them in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't serve the other person. And nobody, I think it's this opportunity always to just go, hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So you retire from full-time work.
Yeah.
And then, right?
Yeah.
For like 10 minutes.
Right.
And then I remember you saying to me, I'm getting bored.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you start doing some other stuff.
Well, I took 2 years of, away from the professional world. Now I was, as you know, involved in a bunch of different things, charity organizations and things like that. But I started to miss my technology world, my Wall Street world a little bit. So about a year ago, I made a few calls around and now I'm working part-time for one of the companies I used to cover, that's very involved in, among other things, developing networking technology for this AI infrastructure and selling it into that. So,
which is like
incredible.
Yeah,
I mean, another charmed life sort of moment where you're working part-time and involved right in the middle of all this. It's just incredible.
You're right when the point in time when, bandwidth and capability for, is going to be an issue, you're there. And now we're at that same point in time.
Yeah. I don't know. Now this one, I think because of the career I've had and the relationships I've formed and, I think that's a lot to do that. This opportunity presented itself as a result of all that. But it's great to be in the middle of it. It's just incredible.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's the most exciting moment of technology in my entire career. And that's saying something because I've gone through that smartphone transition and mobile data and the internet bubble and all this stuff. But I'd say this one is the biggest. This is the most shocking, most exciting one.
Again, going back to your pathway to peak performance, that hopefulness, that I think that gives you this opportunity to continue to be hopeful. And it allows you to arrive at places like this, where it's like, you're in this opportunity where it's the most exciting for me in the technology world. This is the most exciting time by far. But I thought the .com days,
right
prior to .com days, those were the most exciting times in technology. So it's interesting to think about that and sort of how, again, I don't like to tell people what to think. I hope that they take away from these episodes the sort of like they can kind of see their own version of this.
Yeah.
I go back and I watch these episodes often, sometimes 5-6 times, which just sounds crazy, but I hear a different version of the episode every single time. There's always something that I miss.
Yeah.
I think I'll watch this one a lot because it's going to be interesting.
And we'll see about that. I'll check in with you on that. Maybe not. You might watch it and be, well, this was more boring than I thought.
Oh, I know you better than that. So. All right. So, young person today, thinking about a career, from where you're sitting, your perspective on the world, AI, knowing as much as you know about blockchain and crypto and AI and how that's all going to work together at some point in time, where technology is going. What do you say to somebody who's thinking about a career today? What are the areas that they should be focused in?
Well, first of all, know yourself. Know what you're interested in. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
What are you interested in? How do your interests and your abilities overlap? So what do you tend to be good at? What do people tell you you're good at? And what are you interested in? And can you make those two things come together? That's one thing. Another thing is you got to be curious. Nobody can predict. These things are changing too fast. The world's changing very quickly. The nature of work, all the, things are changing. So you have to be a curious person and willing to engage with that world over time and follow it as it develops. Because you're never going to be able to predict it. Anybody that tells you they can predict how this is all going to play out, even in 2 years, don't listen to that person. They have no idea. No, nobody knows. We can only make guesses and kind of see how things progress and follow it. So be curious, continuously learning. AI makes that so much a possibility today, much more than it even was with the internet. So that you've got to do that. And then the grind. It's the grind. You've got to understand that there is if you want to, you know, if you want to look back and feel like you've achieved something in your life, regardless of what it is, whether it be financial or pursuing a career in healthcare and psychological health, and whatever it is that you're interested in, music, you have to grind. You have to get those little 1% improvements every day. I play guitar. The only way to improve at guitar is to grind. You have to put that time in every single day, and it'll accumulate over time. The grind is important.
Yeah, for sure.
And enjoying the grind. You don't want to engage in the grind thinking, I'm going to see an immediate result. No, you have to enjoy the grind. Learn to enjoy that, value that.
I so relate to that. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there's the work stuff that, I can remember times where I was like, oh man, it's the weekend. I don't want to stop working. It's just so weird. People will go, that's really weird. Yeah, probably. But the gym, being in the gym and just
Yeah.
loving that. It's like, people go, oh dude, those workouts are insane. Yeah, they are. And I love
And they're painful.
every rep.
Yeah.
Every rep of it. You do something that I never really, I had mountain bikes, but I was never, and I have the injuries to prove it. But, you have some,
Me too.
we call you Mr. Hamburger. Like there were some points in time where you looked pretty torn up.
Yeah.
But you really talking about the grind, and riding in those long rides, and you guys are doing some really technical stuff that was, pretty.
Yeah, or just I think that I think those are a microcosm of this grind that those are like 3-4 hour rides, and they're hard to start. That's another thing that I would say that is true of life as well. It's hard to start the grind, and it's hard. So it's better to just keep it going. So the ride, it's hard to start. You think, man, I don't know if I want to go on a 4 hour ride today. That seems like a lot. Wouldn't it be easier to just sit here and watch some YouTube or do something relaxing? But once you get started and you're involved in that, it's exciting. It feels good. You feel like you're achieving something and you're doing it. And that kind of is true in life. It's hard to start the grind, but once you're in the grind, if you can learn to enjoy it, you can keep it going. You got to be a little bit careful about grinding through the weekends and things like that. You got to balance yourself, but still, I think it's a better problem to want to keep going than it is to not want to keep going. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
totally.
That's a better problem to have.
Which brings us to this point in the show we always talk about, which is the flow state.
Oh yeah.
So we talk about organizational flow state. An organization like JP Morgan has a flow state. Goldman Sachs has a flow state. One of the things we didn't talk about, we just really quickly want to point out, one of the things I love about the culture at Goldman is that you guys really trust your team in a way in hiring people. In organizations, especially smaller organizations, you can get thirsty for somebody. You can get like, hey, we got to get this, we got to get filled this position. We got to get this person now. And you may overlook certain things. One of the things that you guys did that I really appreciate or I admire is you had the discipline to listen and trust your team. So if one person on your team said, this person is not a fit for this.
That's right.
They didn't make it through. Could you just talk about that?
Yeah. I'll talk a little. That was kind of a thing that I learned in being a part of Goldman is the interview because, as you say, each individual is so important that people need to be able to hold down incredible kind of over their head responsibilities. So you need to hire extremely capable people, and and you don't want to make any mistakes. And of course, everybody makes mistakes, but you try not to. One of the ways not to do that is to have a whole bunch of people interview a person, which is the way Goldman does it. And if even one person says, hey, I don't know if that's a good cultural fit or that person is going to be, then usually that means the process is over. And I think that it may sound harsh to people that aren't familiar with this sort of a thing, but it works.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine that could be incredibly frustrating and disappointing to someone,
right.
but at the same time, there's got to be some sort of like safety in that and knowing that, hey, I'm getting all the perspectives. That's where I think when the team mentality comes in,
Yeah.
where you're really listening to your team, which brings us back to the flow state. So we have an organizational flow state and we have an individual flow state. The ride is a good way to sort of like that notion of starting a ride is tough.
Yeah, that's an individual flow state. You get into it. Now you're in those pedals are moving and you're just flowing. And it just, for somehow a 4-hour ride turns into a 30-minute ride. It just goes by very quickly.
Yeah. And it's enjoyable.
Right.
Yeah. There were times in my career where I didn't want to stop working, like, even though I was completely exhausted, but I was in that flow state and I wanted to stay in it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So Rod, are there any things that you can expand on with regards to that and flow state?
I would say that I struggle, like everybody struggles to get into that state, or maybe some more than others. I find it a struggle to get into that. But again, it's an optimistic view that you can get into it. So you have to have the faith that if I engage with whatever it is I'm working on, and I do that persistently for, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour, I'm probably going to get into a flow state on that thing. And I'm going to, get buried in it and end up 3 hours later feeling like I've really made some progress, or maybe it's only an hour, so that there's a little bit of hopefulness there. There's also an organizational element to that where I think, like you say, that's a kind of a teamwork thing where you can trust the people you work with. The other thing, Jock, that I'd say about flow, discipline leads to flow. Discipline and the persistent execution of a schedule, hey, I'm going to do this every day, regardless. I'm going to wake up in the morning, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at markets, and I'm going to spend some time understanding markets. I'm going to wake up at the same time every day. That discipline for me, that then leads to flow.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of magically happens for me if I am disciplined about my schedule and what I'm doing.
That's phenomenal. I don't think I've heard anybody say it quite like that before. That notion of actually, we talk about time management, but that discipline of actually saying, this is when I'm doing these things, compartmentalizing. And that also offers a lot of freedom, I would imagine, in that I'm able to complete what I needed to complete that day. So then I can go on and I can enjoy my family. I can do these other things, which you are really a devoted guy when it comes to that, which is really impressive.
I try to be. It's funny because it's a funny thing, discipline. It's restricting short-term freedom for the organization or the individual to create long-term freedom. Because I would force my team into disciplined things that we would do, which all of us would be like, oh boy, this is a grind. We don't like. But then that forced restriction of freedom would give us more time and more freedom down the road, which we loved.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not sure we're going to actually use it in the show.
Okay.
So you can let it rip.
All right.
Getting ready to be on CNBC. What's going through your head?
Oh my gosh, so many things. And it's like a little bit like, I guess when you first are doing that, you have so many things that I can't say this, I can say that. You can't imagine the millions of things that are going through your mind because you've got to fit into 2 minutes a message, or a minute and a half now, because people's attention spans have been reducing over time. Minute and a half, you have to fit in some key point, some point you want to make, but you're going to get asked questions. It's an interactive session. You also have to, at the same time avoid saying things you don't want to say that would reflect badly on you or reflect badly on your organization, things like that, or just stray off the topic that might, take away from the point you're trying to make. So there's a whole lot of stuff going through your mind.
You got that's a lot of weight to carry.
That is right. Yeah.
That's going a lot. You're going into a live TV. I mean, there's a delay, but you're going into a live TV situation. It's broadcast and it's national or international. It's big.
That's right. And if there's no cuts, it's live. So that in this type of a format, of course, you can cut things. If I say something silly, you can cut it out, that kind of thing. It doesn't happen in live TV.
Yeah. There are no do-overs there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it is a tough, but again, it's like anything. I've learned this over time. It seems daunting to think about doing that, and to anybody, I think it's daunting and it's very intimidating. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Jamie Dimon or name the famous technology person you see on TV or whatever all the time. Those people, when they first did it, they must have been intimidated by it, but they just do it, and as you do it, you become better at it, and you develop a skill and it becomes to some extent second nature to you. You always have to think about these things and stay a little nervous when you go into them. But, I don't like the fake it till you make it. I don't like that. But I think maybe do it until it becomes second nature, which isn't as sexy a thing to say, but that's a truth for me.
Show up and make it happen.
And take a chance that bet on yourself. You will be able to. You can handle this. You can do it. Bet on yourself. Try it. Sometimes we're going to hit a brick wall. Sometimes we hit something we're not capable of, or it doesn't fit us as a person. But you don't know it until you do it.
Yeah, and if you don't do it,
you'll never know,
and you'll regret probably not doing it.
You'll never know whether you could have done it or not.
Right. So better to try and fail than to never try.
And don't try just once, try a few times, because you may fail the first time.
Right.
Because these are hard things to do. They're not easy.
Yeah, for sure. There was one thing I wanted to ask you about that, which is there was a period of time in some of that reporting covering Apple.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness.
And you were giving some forecasts on Apple.
Yeah. Worst. Okay. But yeah, let's just call it like it is. It was the worst stock call I ever made in my life, in my career. I had a view of Apple that I think still stands, which is the company, great company, by the way, probably the best quality company I ever covered.
And by the way, you're a huge Apple user.
Huge user, fantastic products, fantastic company. Yeah. I mean, it is, I can't say enough good things about the company. On the other hand, though, just law of large numbers. Company was reaching maximum penetration. You could kind of see it coming. It wasn't quite there yet. And so I started to get a little bit more pessimistic about the future, the growth prospects of the company. COVID comes along. We see this huge drop off at the beginning of the year in demand for all sorts of things. And I had seen that pattern before. There's a lesson in this, by the way, that I'll mention as I get through it, but seen this kind of pattern before. I thought, oh boy, I've seen this movie before. This is going to be bad. Downgraded all the stocks that were everything exposed to consumer electronics. I downgraded it, whether it be Dell, Apple, everything. But of course, Apple was the most prominent one, the most visible one. Well, by that summer, of course, we know how the story played out. Everybody's at home and they're buying record amounts of technology. So this is a terrible stock call across the board, but Apple was the most visible part of that. And the lesson I learned from all of it is, hey, be humble when you see new things come along. I thought that I was looking at a pattern I'd seen numerous times before in my career. Well, it turns out that a once in 100-year pandemic is something I had never seen. And it might have been a good idea to take a step back and think, this could come out a little differently than I think it will. And sure enough, it did.
Yeah.
Now, on the other flip side of that, of course, we had all the hangover and all that that we're still going through, frankly, from that pandemic in terms of technology purchasing, employment. We're seeing that in tech. one of the things that gives me optimism about technology employment right now, because a lot of people out here are very pessimistic about that. We're just getting back to employment levels we had pre-COVID.
It's
With
really
these
amazing.
massive hiring gains, and then we're coming back to the baseline. But it's not as if we're all this, we're going back to levels unprecedented low levels of employment.
I remember our offices in the city, just in Jackson Square, just like for lease, for lease, for lease, for lease, for lease. I mean, just an endless, this huge amount of real estate available. And I don't know that it's ever going to come back to the way that it was before, because I think we've really figured out that, it's possible to work from home or hybrid.
Yeah, I think it's good to be hybrid rather than just home, because the reason we're interacting personally is because there's so much more information we can share with each other. We can get a
Yeah.
much better feeling for what the other person's saying. We can learn more from each other this way. So that in-person element of work, I think, is important, but being able to mix it up and have the quality of life and the balance you achieve from being able to do a little bit at home, that's great.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So we were talking about something before, and I'd love for you to expand on it.
Okay. Another passion of mine is, the value of our existence, whether you're a religious person or not.
Mm.
And one thing that I always say to people I've got, you and I both have a lot of friends. Not many people go to church or are, engaged with that kind of a thing regularly. So I got a lot of friends that don't do that. But what I say to them, last time somebody counted, at a minimum, there are 200 billion stars in the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. 200 billion. If all of the expansion we're talking about, going to Mars and these things, let's roll that clock forward 1,000 years. Maybe we get to a million of those star systems. Can you imagine the human race if we were to do that? I think I calculated this the other day. That would be 0.0005% of the volume of our galaxy. And when people look at the the likelihood that there's other civilizations like us in this time, the people that study how did life start, all this kind of thing, I think increasingly are coming to the conclusion it's extremely rare. We may even be the only one in the galaxy, notwithstanding Area 51, you know, uh, conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So we could be the only one. You may be one of the rarest things that exists in all of creation. Don't take that for granted. Take that seriously. This existence is valuable, every second of it. You may be the only one for all you know. By the way, there's a trillion galaxies.
Yeah.
And that's the other side of it, is how small we are, and how we could be the rarest of rare things, and just, take that seriously.
Yeah, I think the takeaway there is that, and it kind of goes back again to your pathway to peak performance and everything that you do, which is maximize every moment.
Yeah. Take those moments seriously. I don't always do it myself to the extent that I would like to. None of us do, but boy, if you can just remind yourself of that somehow. I do it in church, but you can do it other ways. Remind yourself of that on a regular basis. That's pretty valuable.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's be kind, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have a kind of a brutal culture, one in which there was a period of time where it was sort of like, I mean, when I came up, it was sort of like, you're going to make it or we're going to get whacked. Now, I feel today it's like there's an opportunity for us to be kinder to one another
Yeah.
and think about the bigger picture.
And I tell you what, I am, regardless of whether you're religious or not, I'm an unapologetic follower of Jesus's teachings. Whether you believe, whatever you believe, this is why we say things like that in our culture. It's because he was radically different in the way that he talked about these things. And he was all about forgiveness, kindness, reach down, help the little guy, help the person nobody else likes. Those teachings are valuable.
Kyle once said something to me that there was somebody that's getting on my nerves.
It happens.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And Kyle said something to me. She said, God loves him as much as he loves you.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
put it all back into perspective.
Yeah.
And, in the grand scheme of things, what am I here to do? I'm here to actually, I love that notion. And as I've gotten older, that's become more and more important to me. More and more. I mean, a lot of what this show is all about is like trying to lay down the groundwork for young people to be able to see
Right.
something that we couldn't have seen. It didn't exist. It didn't exist. So what we're trying to do here is create something that young people can look at and say, oh, well, there was this really successful analyst. This guy really knew what was going, you know what I mean? And how did he get there? And I'm sure there were ways to kind of figure that out along the way. I guess, you look for mentors, and I'm sure you had some great mentors. One of the things we talk about.
Yeah, they did.
Who comes to mind? Favorite teacher, favorite mentor?
I've got a few of those. One of the guys that, I was lucky early in my career, had a boss who was blind. And he was the first blind person to go to Harvard Business School. And you learn from someone like that who, that is challenging, as you know. That's challenging, and yet fully engaged with life. And by the way, went blind later in life. Wasn't born blind. Went blind in his teens. So here's a person that I know had challenges, but yet was able to inspire others, do a lot of things, that were positive for his own career, but also mentoring other people. That was really a valuable person for me to meet early in my career. Because you recognize, hey, if this guy's name's Jim Gibbons, if he can do it, I can do it. That was inspiring to me. And then, a lot of other mentors, people that are great thinkers that I was able to be exposed to. Just a lot of lucky happenstances. Maybe though, I think one thing to take away from this too is, a lot of people watch this and go, well, I'm not going to be that lucky. I won't come across. There are people out there that you will come across that can teach you something if you're open enough to recognize them.
And the next step is to have the courage to actually take action. It's not always easy to put yourself out there.
It's hard.
And make that say to someone, hey, you represent where I want to go. I need help getting there. Could you spend some time with me?
Yeah. People love that. And people that, my kids, there's an issue with them. They're reluctant to ask people for advice, for help, but ask people for help, ask them for advice. So what if they say no? You can ask somebody else,
I think most people really want to.
Yeah,
They
of course.
really want to help.
They want to give back. People want to give back. They want to help other people. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, Rod, you know what? It's great to have you in. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a super busy guy.
Yeah, thanks, Jock.
And I look forward to the potential of having you back. And
great conversation. I've had more interesting things to talk about than I thought I would. No, great conversation. Thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Hey, thanks everyone for watching the show. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out here at the channel, and share the video with someone who might be interested in supporting the charity that our guest mentioned in the episode. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.